Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a little more steamy than your morning coffee. Ancient Roman baths, not the fancy spa experience with cucumber slices on your eyes. No, I'm talking about the baths where things were definitely questionable. Imagine crowds of sweaty people, a little bit of mud, some questionable hygiene practices, and don't even get me started on the special water features. So before we get into it, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Only if you enjoy what I do here, though. I'm not here to force you into anything. No guilt trips. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, because it's probably way later than you think. Now dim those lights, turn on a fan for some calming white noise, and get cozy. Let's pause for a second. Ever wondered what it was really like to strip down in front of strangers in ancient Rome? What were these baths actually for? Was it a wellness retreat? Or were the Romans just really into sweating together? Was the water ever actually clean? Or was that just a clever marketing ploy? And now, congratulations! You've just woken up in ancient Rome. The year is 200 AD. You're surrounded by naked strangers, steamy rooms, and the unmistakable scent of fish sauce in the air. Don't worry, it'll only get more ridiculous from here. You're standing in the grand entrance of the bathhouse. The heat is immediate, a thick wall of warmth hitting your face as you step through the door. It smells like sweat, herbs, and the unmistakable tang of body odor. You've officially entered the world of ancient Roman hygiene, where social status is judged as much by your ability to endure the heat as by your social graces. But don't worry, this place is a community, and in this sweaty, noisy haven, you're not alone. Everyone's here for the same reason, to bathe, gossip, and let's be honest, occasionally plot their next political move. You can almost hear the philosophers debating the meaning of life between sudsy scrubs. As you step further inside, you notice the sheer size of the place. This is no cozy spa retreat. The bathhouse is more like a sprawling palace with steamy rooms, cold pools, and crowded hallways. Think of it as the ancient Roman version of a gym, a spa, and a networking event all rolled into one, except instead of dumbbells, you've got oil, towels, and a whole lot of naked people. You thought your gym was crowded, but here it's an absolute squeeze, and not just because of the physical bodies. It's crowded with people, sounds, and the kind of atmosphere that makes you wonder if everyone is getting the same cleansing experience, or if some of them are just here to make awkward eye contact while trying to avoid someone else's soap bubbles. Your first task, navigate the noise. You would think that with all these people, there'd be a chorus of quiet relaxation, maybe soft music, gentle splashes of water, a peaceful hum. Nope. The air is thick with the sounds of people gossiping about gladiator fights, political betrayals, and yes, personal hygiene tips, because apparently this is the place to offer unsolicited advice. You can't escape the murmurs of the guy next to you talking about how the Senate's latest decision will change the course of history. You tell him to chill out, but you're barely able to keep your eyes open as the steam slowly lulls you into a relaxed stupor. The only thing that makes the loud chatter somewhat bearable is the fact that everyone is, more or less, in the same sweaty boat. The hot room, the caldarium, is where you'll first try to find your place. But don't expect peace. Oh no, everyone's here for the same reason, to sweat, to wash away the grime of their daily lives, and to have an excuse to strip down to their most exposed self, while they definitely don't make eye contact with that senator from across the room. You're literally in a situation where the heat isn't the most uncomfortable part. It's the fact that you're being judged on your ability to withstand that heat while also looking cool doing it. It's like trying to run a marathon while balancing a glass of wine, except the glass is filled with sweat, yours and everyone else's. But here's the trick. No one talks about the sweat. Oh, sure, there are whispers about the latest political maneuverings, and the philosophers might wax poetic about the nature of life. But at the end of the day, it's all about how well you can handle the heat. You sweat. You sip on your cup of watered-down wine, pretending that the stench of 30 sweaty bodies is the smell of health and wellness. You've got this. As long as you can stay upright, maintain some semblance of composure, and keep the conversation flowing, you're doing just fine. Somewhere in the background, there's a bath attendant splashing water into one of the baths. The sound of the water splashing against the stone echoes through the steamy space. The attendant's jobs are simple but vital. Make sure everyone's moist enough to withstand the heat, clean enough to avoid smelling like a herd of cattle, and just distracted enough from the mild terror of being in a room full of strangers. Oh, and don't forget about the scraping of the strigils, which is something no one really explains to you until you're already covered in oil and bracing yourself for the physical and emotional trauma of getting scraped clean by a stranger. This bathhouse is as much about the physical cleansing as it is about socializing, which means you're suddenly wondering, did I just join a weird Roman version of speed dating? When was the last time you had a heart-to-heart with your local baker or a random senator while sweating your life away? You've got political alliances being forged, business deals happening, and people making moves, all while trying to wash themselves. And you're just trying to figure out how to not make a fool of yourself while slipping around in olive oil. There's no social grace higher than enduring this communal disaster with dignity, which is why it's essentially the place to network in Rome. In a world where public speaking and social status were built on appearances and the ability to not collapse from heat stroke, the bathhouse was the ultimate test. You didn't just prove your worth by surviving the gladiator pits or the marketplace brawls. No, your social skills were measured here, among the steam and sweat, in a room full of strangers, and most importantly, in your ability to talk shop while covered in oil. But here's the kicker. As much as you try to maintain your cool, you're still sweating. You can't hide it. And while you might be pretending to hold it together, everyone around you is in the same boat, fighting the heat, the noise, and the awkwardness that comes with being naked in front of dozens of people who might at any moment spill your darkest secrets. Welcome to the Roman bathhouse. It's social, it's hot, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But hey, you might just make it through with some interesting stories to tell, or at least one epic nap afterward. Let's talk about the ritual of bathing. It's not just about getting clean, though that's technically part of it. No, the Romans were into rituals. The baths weren't just a luxury, they were a lifestyle. Picture this. You start in the cold room, which sounds innocent enough, until you realize the temperature difference between it and the steamy, almost suffocating warmth of the caldarium. The goal isn't just hygiene, it's to shock your body into something almost spiritual. That's right, you're not just getting clean, you're elevating yourself through sweat and steam. It's like a modern-day spa experience, but without the fancy oils and essential scents, and way more naked people. You begin in the frigidarium, the cold room. Sounds relaxing, doesn't it? But let's be real. It's more like a brief mental reset than actual chill time. The air is cool and crisp, but your body? It's still confused from the heat you've just stepped into. You're freezing, but it's a pleasant kind of shock, like that feeling of walking into a brisk morning after an overzealous nap. The problem is, that chill doesn't last long. The moment you step foot into the tepidarium, the lukewarm room, you immediately understand why they used the cold room as the first step. It's a setup. The tepidarium is that moment in your spa experience when you start to think, am I really relaxing, or am I just sitting here awkwardly between extreme temperature changes? Now you may think, okay, I've had enough with the temperature extremes. I'm just here to clean up. But that's where the real wellness kicks in. You've been slowly building up to the caldarium, the heart of the Roman bathing experience. You walk into the steamy, suffocating warmth, and suddenly, it feels like the universe is trying to melt you into the stone. But don't worry, this is where the Romans did their real work. You're not just bathing, you're transforming. The warmth wraps around you like a comforting blanket, and it starts to feel like your entire body is being put through a kind of purifying ritual. Sweat pours off you like water from a fountain, but this isn't just physical cleansing, it's spiritual. In this room, you're not just another peasant or senator, you're a participant in a centuries-old process of self-purification. Now, while you're sweating like an Olympic athlete, everyone around you is busy gossiping, discussing politics, and probably plotting a few crimes here and there. Yes, the bathhouse was the original hangout spot, where the only thing more intense than the heat was the amount of information being passed around. Picture this. You're sitting there trying to clear your mind when someone leans over and whispers that the emperor is getting a new chariot. That's right. Getting a new chariot was all the rage in Rome. You're surrounded by scandal, gossip, and the faint smell of burnt oil. Not exactly what you expected when you signed up for this wellness experience, right? As your body starts to reach peak sweat levels, you're handed a Strigil, the metal tool used for scraping away the oil and dirt that's accumulated on your skin. It sounds like a medieval torture device, but hey, it's part of the experience. You lie back, taking deep breaths as an attendant scrapes you down, peeling away layers of stress, dirt, and probably some very questionable decisions from your past. It's the ancient Roman version of a deep tissue massage, except this time, there's no soothing music or calming spa scents. Just a scraping metal tool and the lingering aroma of the communal bath that makes you wonder if you'll ever get that fresh feeling back. Once that's done, you stumble over to the caldarium again, hoping to recover from the whole getting scraped thing. Here, it's not about the actual bathing anymore, it's about the recovery. The Romans believed in contrast therapy, go hot, then cold, then hot again. It was supposed to balance out your body and give you that real spa feeling, but in reality, it just feels like you've signed up for an intense workout regimen where the goal is to not pass out from the temperature changes. But don't be fooled. The baths aren't just about sweating and scraping. They were also a place to meditate and reflect on life's big questions. Ever wonder if your soul needs a good scrubbing too? Well, Roman bathhouses were the original place to do it. As the hot steam swirls around you and you sit there trying not to pass out, you can almost hear the philosophers debating deep existential questions. What is the meaning of life? Why is there so much sweat in here? Do we even need to scrub our skin, or is it just the inside that matters? It's like getting your body cleaned while your brain also gets a good rinse. When it's all said and done, you're left feeling both completely relaxed and strangely transcendent. You've survived the heat, the sweat, the strange scraping rituals, and of course, the social game that is a bathhouse. You're now part of a time-honored tradition of Romans who used their bathing time for so much more than just getting clean. You've come out of the steamy depths of the bathhouse a new person, maybe a little more relaxed, definitely a lot sweatier, but certainly more in tune with the way Romans did things. No oils, no fancy music, just sweat, steam, and a whole lot of philosophy. And hey, as long as no one mentions the Strigil, it wasn't half bad. The frigidarium, the cold room, the place where you're supposed to cool off after your steamy sessions in the caldarium. But don't get too excited. The frigidarium isn't exactly frigid. Sure, it's cooler than the other rooms, but it's not the ice-cold oasis you might be imagining. It's more like a lukewarm, slightly uncomfortable waiting area between a sauna and, well, another sauna. Still, it's your chance to pretend that you're actually cooling off, even though you're just melting into the stone floors. You step inside, relieved to be out of the suffocating heat of the caldarium, and immediately you're hit by the difference in temperature, but only just. The air is definitely cooler, but it doesn't have that refreshing, this is what I needed feel. No, this is the room where your body realizes it's no longer being cooked alive, but it's also not quite ready to feel fully comfortable. It's like when you open the fridge after baking cookies and get a blast of cool air, but without the cookie satisfaction. It's like your body is just waiting for something colder to happen, and it's simply not happening. The walls in here are made of smooth stone, and you can feel the chill of it seeping into your tired muscles as you collapse onto the floor. But here's the trick. It's not actually that comfortable either. The stone is cold, yes, but it's not refreshing. It's just awkwardly, it's in between. You're kind of lying there, trying to convince yourself that you're actually cooling down, but instead, your body is just floating in a limbo between heat and actual relaxation. This is when you realize the Romans didn't really understand comfortable the way we do. They understood endurance, and the frigidarium was part of their grand, ancient scheme to make you tough it out in every room. If you can survive this, you can survive anything. But at least you're not alone in your frustration. In this half-warm, half-cold space, you're surrounded by other bathers who are also trying to make the best of their cool down. People are lying around on the stone benches, eyes half-lidded, waiting for the moment when this awkward middle zone is finally over. Some people are even napping on the stone, thinking that their bodies are just going to accept the idea that they're in a place meant for cooling down, even though they still feel like they've been lightly simmered in a cauldron of heat. But at least there's a little hope that in a few minutes they'll feel the brisk relief of fresh air. You're just trying not to slide into a puddle of sweat while pretending you're in a nice, breezy oasis. Let's take a moment here. Have you ever tried to take a nap in a waiting room? It's that awkward in-between stage where you're not really resting, but also not actively doing anything. It's like when you're caught in the middle of a line at the DMV, unsure if it's worth sitting down or standing up. That's what the frigidarium feels like. It's a moment of uncertainty. And just when you start to think, maybe I've had enough of this cool down thing, the attendants, probably a little too enthusiastic, are ushering people out to the tepidarium, the lukewarm room that's still just one sauna away from another sauna. It's like walking from one extreme of uncomfortable warmth to another. But here's the twist. While the Frigidarium doesn't offer the chilling breeze you might have expected, it does offer you a moment of introspection. You're just lying there, absorbing the awkwardness of the space, listening to the echoes of murmured conversations around you. The Romans didn't just use this time to cool their bodies. They used it to rest, to reflect, and to find solace in the quiet moments between the heat. Maybe that's the real point of the Frigidarium. Maybe it's not about the temperature. It's about finding peace in discomfort, a moment to be still and breathe in the chaos of life. It's also when you realize that every room in the bathhouse had its own bizarre ritual. The Caldarium was the extreme heat, the Frigidarium was the lukewarm middle ground, and now you're ready for the Tepidarium, where you'll get a slightly better version of cool. This is the way Romans worked through their day. If you can endure each step, you're not just cleansing your body, you're also toughening your spirit, your mind too. You were never meant to be comfortable. You were meant to be resilient. By the time you leave the Frigidarium, you're not exactly feeling cool, but you're certainly feeling something. A bit more ancient Roman, a little tougher, and possibly questioning the entire concept of temperature. Welcome to the world of Roman wellness. Now, what would a bathhouse be without gossip? Absolutely nothing. The Romans knew this. These bathhouses were the social medias of their day. It's the perfect spot to hear the latest rumors about your neighbor's wife or the scandalous actions of the local senator. Everyone's here, half naked and dripping in sweat, so why not spill the tea? You'll hear everything from whispered conspiracies to wild tales of gladiator victories, but no matter what, there's always a rumor in the air. It's like a combination of a spa, a gym, and your most chaotic family reunion. In this steamy environment, no conversation stays private for long. The moment you step into the bathhouse, you're enveloped in a cloud of secrets and intrigue. You might think that all the Romans care about is getting clean, but that couldn't be further from the truth. No one in the bathhouse is truly focused on hygiene. Oh no, everyone is way more concerned with who's sleeping with whom, who's cheating on their spouse, and who's plotting against whom, all while scrubbing away layers of dirt with olive oil and scraping their bodies down with the Strigil. It's like a reality show, except it's happening in real time, and the cast is dripping in sweat. As you wander deeper into the bathhouse, you can't help but overhear the gossip swirling around you. From the bustling, steamy rooms, you catch snippets of conversation. Did you hear about Tiberius? Word is he's having an affair with the consul's wife. The voices are low, but they carry like whispers in a crowded room. It's hard to avoid, really. You're trapped in a hot, sweaty space with dozens of people all trying to outdo each other with the juiciest piece of gossip. And the best part? There's no filter. No one cares about decorum when they're half naked, vulnerable, and massaging their sweaty bodies with oils. It's as though the steam not only clears your skin, but also clears away all inhibitions. This is the Roman version of Twitter, except with a lot more body odor. If you're lucky, you might get to hear some of the most interesting rumors. Maybe a senator's son has been seen sneaking around with the daughter of a notorious gladiator. Maybe a general's wife is rumored to be sending love letters to a foreign diplomat. Or maybe you'll overhear something truly scandalous, like a high-ranking Roman official planning a coup. But here's the thing, none of it can be trusted. The bathhouse gossip mill operates on pure speculation and half-truths. Everyone is a suspect, and everyone is an expert on everyone else's business. The only certainty? The more sweat, the juicier the rumors. Sometimes, the gossip takes a more personal turn. You might find yourself at the center of a conversation, and not necessarily for the reasons you'd want. Did you forget to scrub your feet properly? Well, don't be surprised if someone starts spreading the word that you're one of those people who can't wash their legs properly. Or worse, maybe your attempt at engaging in conversation about a gladiator match turns into a full-blown critique of your own social standing. It's like a walking, sweating version of the Real Housewives of Rome, but with a lot more oil and significantly less clothing. But the beauty of the Roman bathhouse isn't just in the gossip, it's in how it connects everyone. There's a strange sense of equality that comes with sweating it out together. Whether you're a senator or a commoner, once you're in the bath, everyone's just as sweaty and uncomfortable as the next person. It's hard to keep up the airs of high status when you're dripping in sweat, clinging to your towel like it's your last shred of dignity. Even the most powerful people in Rome are reduced to nothing more than a bunch of overheated bodies trying to make small talk while avoiding accidentally touching anyone else's bare skin. There's something incredibly humanizing about this whole experience. Of course, there's always the danger of getting too caught up in the gossip. The bathhouse is the place where reputations can be made or destroyed. You could start your day by just wanting to relax, but if you get too involved in the chatter, you might find yourself dragged into a political conspiracy you didn't sign up for. Want to make it out of the bathhouse unscathed? Keep your ears open, your mouth shut, and your feet moving quickly. Otherwise, you might end up as the subject of next week's whispers, and trust me, you don't want that. But perhaps the most absurd part of all this gossip is the way it thrives in such an unlikely place. These aren't your modern-day office spaces or internet chat rooms where rumors can spread from one click to the next. No, this is a place of literal sweat and slander, where your body and reputation are equally exposed. Yet despite the chaos, it's oddly comforting in its own way. At least everyone is on equal footing when they're soaking wet, covered in olive oil, and surrounded by half-naked strangers. The Roman bathhouse may have been full of scandals, betrayals, and intrigue, but it was also a social hub, a place where everyone could gather, gossip, and secretly hope that they wouldn't be the next one dragged through the mud. In the end, it's clear that the Roman bathhouse wasn't just a place to clean your body. It was where you came to wash your soul, if by soul you mean your reputation, your secrets, and perhaps even your dignity. You couldn't escape the gossip, but you could enjoy the chaos. After all, a little sweat, a little slander, and a lot of overheard stories. That was the Roman way of unwinding. Ever felt like you have zero personal space? Well, welcome to the Roman bathhouse, where personal boundaries were as ancient as the idea of personal hygiene. Imagine being packed in like sardines, rubbing elbows, literally, with strangers, while you're trying to clean yourself in the most intimate of ways. The concept of privacy here was as foreign as the concept of shower stalls. But hey, you're all there for the same reason: communal health and wellness. So just smile awkwardly, keep your towel close, and try to avoid eye contact. This isn't the time for modesty, my friend. From the moment you step into the public bathhouse, you're hit by the sheer number of people around you. It's packed in a way that would make a subway at rush hour feel like a luxury. Personal space? Forget it. You'll be so close to the person next to you, you could probably feel their heartbeats. And that's not even considering the actual proximity. You're all crammed together in the warm, steamy rooms, trying to cleanse yourself without brushing against someone's sweaty back or catching an awkward glimpse of their personal bits as you attempt to shuffle around. The Romans didn't exactly have the concept of private baths. Instead, everything was communal. It was like the Roman version of a gym locker room, except instead of getting ready to go home, you're actively bathing in the same room as everyone else. There's no separate stalls for you to wash up in, no showers with privacy doors, no barriers between you and the next person besides the occasional slippage of your towel. This is the ultimate social experiment, where everyone from peasants to senators shares the same space, drenched in sweat, discussing politics, and occasionally religion. And yes, everyone's body is on display for anyone to see. Here, modesty isn't just optional, it's practically non-existent. Everyone's in the same boat. You're not exactly at your most dignified in the bathhouse, but that's part of the charm, right? You're forced into a shared vulnerability with the person next to you, whether you like it or not. So, if you've ever wondered what it would be like to share an intimate, personal moment with a complete stranger in a very public space, then congratulations. You're living the Roman dream. Just don't make eye contact for too long. It's awkward, and you're not getting out of this without feeling at least a little uncomfortable. And then there's the soundscape. As you try to navigate this packed, sweaty space, you're treated to a symphony of sloshing water, murmured conversations, the occasional squeak of someone slipping on the wet stone floors, and the ever-present sounds of skin rubbing against skin as everyone attempts to maneuver through the crowds. It's not exactly serene, but it's certainly lively. You can overhear bits of conversation about political intrigues, gladiator victories, or, if you're lucky, someone spilling gossip about who's sleeping with whom. It's a place where everyone is on display, not just physically, but socially. Everyone here is trying to outdo each other with their wit and gossip, all while trying to clean themselves in a giant hot tub with no personal space. What could be more Roman than that? As you finally make your way toward a bath, you realize there's really no way around it. You're either going to have to get comfortable with being very close to strangers, or you'll spend the entire bath just holding your breath and hoping the experience is over before you drown in awkwardness. It's a communal experience that forces you to deal with the reality of being human. We all need to clean ourselves, and we're all in it together. The idea of privacy just doesn't fit into this equation. But let's be honest, you're probably not that upset about it. There's something strangely liberating about the absence of personal space. In the bathhouse, you can't hide. You're just there, exposed, sweating it out, just like everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes the whole experience feel so alive. The real kicker comes when you realize that after you've fought your way through the crowds, dodged a few elbows, and tried to avoid looking at the person beside you while they scrub every inch of their body with a rough sponge, you'll be doing the same thing. That's right. No amount of social status, wealth, or power can save you from the reality of being sweaty and naked in a public bath with hundreds of other sweaty, naked people. And once you're in it, there's no going back. It's the ultimate equalizer. So as you settle in and try to enjoy your bath, you can't help but think, this is what the Romans truly valued. It wasn't about personal space. It wasn't about privacy. It was about the communal experience. It was about sharing that space with others, talking politics, getting clean, and enduring the shared discomfort that brought everyone to the same level. If you can survive a public bath with complete strangers in close proximity. Well, maybe you can survive anything in Roman society. But hey, just remember, no matter how much you want to find a quiet corner, there's always someone right next to you. So take a deep breath, adjust your towel, and try to enjoy the Bathhouse's version of personal growth. It's going to be a sweaty, sweaty ride. Now, let's talk about the real issue, the bathwater. You thought modern-day pool water was bad, didn't you? Roman bathwater had its own set of challenges. First off, it wasn't always cleaned. You might be getting into a pool of water that's been used by hundreds of people, some of whom were, not the most hygienic. But wait, there's more. There was a good chance that the water was contaminated with who knows what. Maybe a bit of bacteria, maybe some sweat, maybe. Well, let's just say there were a lot of unseen dangers lurking in that warm, murky water. Imagine it. You walk into the bathhouse, dripping with sweat from the hot rooms, eager for a refreshing dip in the warm pool. You've worked your way through the caldarium, feeling like your skin is now soft as butter, and now it's time to float like a Roman aristocrat. The water looks inviting, almost too inviting. But hold up. That nice, steamy water wasn't just there for you to relax. It's a public bath. And public baths meant public water. Water that had been used, reused, and probably overused more than your local gym's shower stall. And let's just say, you really don't want to know how many other sweaty, naked bodies have soaked in it before you. You might try to convince yourself that the water is just warm and that it's cleansing, but the reality is, this bathwater is a biohazard. For starters, the Romans didn't have filters. There was no filtration system, no chlorine, and definitely no quality control. So you could easily find yourself submerged in water that's more of a bacterial soup than a therapeutic soak. Imagine hundreds of sweaty bodies, oil-slathered skin, and the occasional stray hairs floating around, all mixed with the naturally occurring, unseen contaminants. Yuck. This was essentially Roman spa life. You were just as likely to come out of the bath with a new illness as you were with clean skin. And let's not forget that the water wasn't always replaced. The Romans did have some sophisticated plumbing systems for their time, but their maintenance was, shall we say, spotty. The bathhouses were often kept at a steamy temperature, which might have been perfect for relaxing, but not for cleanliness. Water that had been used by hundreds of bathers wasn't always drained and replaced. Sometimes it just sat there between baths, getting murkier and more contaminated. Sure, it may have looked like fresh, inviting water, but in reality, you might be wading through a cocktail of bodily fluids, oils, and whatever germs the previous bather brought in with them. The worst part? The Romans had no idea that all this water was in fact a breeding ground for germs. They didn't have the luxury of modern microbiology to tell them about bacteria or viruses. In fact, they believed that the heat from the water itself was enough to kill off any harmful elements. Spoiler alert, since it wasn't. They may have been ahead of their time in many areas, but understanding the dangers of pathogens wasn't exactly one of them. So when you're diving into that warm water, you could be getting far more than you bargained for. Diseases, infections, and skin irritations were a real possibility. Now imagine this scene playing out in your mind. You're just relaxing in the bath, chatting with your fellow Romans about the latest chariot race or political scandal, thinking you're living the good life. But your skin, which is now softened by the oils and warmth, could easily become the perfect breeding ground for infections. And speaking of oils, Those weren't always pure either. The Romans used olive oil to clean and soften their skin, but with hundreds of people slathering oil on themselves and then slipping into the same water, you have to wonder how much oil really stayed on the surface of the water. That's right, the oils could clog pores and leave you susceptible to rashes and other skin conditions. It's like trying to have a skin detox, but instead, you're adding more layers of problems. Not to mention the dirt, there was also a fair amount of dirt that collected in the bathwater. The stone floors and walls of the bathhouse weren't cleaned every day, or maybe ever, so the dirt you brought in from the outside world had a nice, comfortable spot in the water to settle. Just picture it. The same water you're floating in might have been crawling with dirt particles, hair, oil, and whatever else happened to wash into the pool. By the time you're ready to leave, you're probably wondering if you're actually dirtier than when you walked in. But here's the ultimate twist. After you've spent your time bathing and relaxing in this lovely stew of contamination, you then go about your day, probably forgetting what you've just immersed yourself in. Roman bathers didn't think twice about the water quality, and neither should you, right? Well, wrong. The consequences of these cleaning rituals might have been more dangerous than we like to imagine. Bathing was a key part of Roman culture, but it wasn't exactly a hygienic paradise. So next time you think about how clean the Romans might have been, just remember, their idea of cleaning was more about socializing in the water than actually keeping things sanitary. In the end, the real dangers of Roman bathwater were not just physical, they were also about a lack of understanding. A lack of awareness about the fact that maybe, just maybe, all that murky water wasn't as safe as they thought. And you're left wondering whether that relaxing dip was worth the risks you didn't see coming. After all, sometimes ignorance really is bliss. Oh, the steam rooms. The ancient Romans had the right idea when it came to sweating it out, but they might have been a little too enthusiastic about it. These rooms were basically saunas on steroids, where you'd sit in the heat until you felt like your skin was melting off. But here's the kicker. They didn't just sit there for health reasons. Oh no. The Romans were trying to get rid of every ounce of dirt, sweat, and possibly the will to live, as the heat pressed down on them like a modern-day workout class you never signed up for. Forget the sweat, though. What about the smells? You're sitting in the steamy room, hoping the heat will work its magic. The walls are slick with moisture, the air thick with heat, and the sound of distant murmurs fills the space. It's like your body is being gently steamed, except it feels anything but gentle. It's like someone is trying to cook you from the inside out, slowly turning you into a pile of human goo. The Romans didn't mess around when it came to heat. The steam rooms were as intense as a spin class, except instead of a motivational instructor, you've got ancient stone walls and some poorly designed air circulation. The goal? To sweat. And sweat you did. The temperature in these rooms wasn't just hot, it was brutal. Picture yourself sitting there, and with every minute your skin becomes hotter, your body drenched in sweat. At first, you think it's fine. You're just warming up. But as the minutes drag on, you start to feel your muscles getting tighter, your breath shorter. Every inch of your body is soaked through, and you can feel the sweat trickling down into places you didn't know could sweat. And then, of course, the smell. It's not just the natural scent of sweat and steam. Oh no. You've got a whole community of bathers sharing the same air, all sweating, all releasing their body odors into the thick, steamy atmosphere. Imagine trying to breathe in what can only be described as a mixture of body odor, olive oil, and whatever perfume the most generous person in the room decided to splash on before entering. At this point, it's not about health, it's about endurance. It wasn't all about sweating away impurities either. The Romans were convinced that the intense heat helped with mental clarity and detoxing. But let's be real for a second. There's no clarity when your brain is slowly frying from the sheer discomfort of the room. You're struggling to find peace while your body is at war with itself. Your brain is sending out the signal. This is too much. We need to get out. But your body is still sweating. In the middle of this steam-induced struggle, someone nearby starts talking about the latest gladiator match, or maybe they're spilling some gossip about the emperor's new mistress. How are you supposed to focus on those intellectual discussions when you're barely holding on to the edge of consciousness, drenched in sweat, trying not to pass out from the heat? And then comes the ultimate Roman paradox. After enduring the steam room's suffocating heat and potentially life-threatening levels of sweat, you emerge, ready for the cold plunge, thinking that the worst is over. But no, the moment you step out into the cooler air, you realize something. Your skin still smells like you've been trapped in a boiling pot of soup. The sweat isn't gone. It's just been repositioned in every pore. You don't feel rejuvenated. You feel wrung out, like a towel someone forgot to hang out to dry. Now, you're faced with a new problem. How do you go about the rest of your day when your body smells like a public bath and you're not even sure where your own body ends and the body of your fellow bather begins? While the Romans certainly believed that sweating in these rooms was good for their health, let's be honest, it was probably a lot more about socializing and tolerating the awkwardness of being in a space that was literally overflowing with people. The idea of a relaxing steam bath was in reality a communal exercise in discomfort. You weren't just releasing toxins, you were being slowly roasted like a pig on a spit, surrounded by a cloud of steam and a chorus of unsolicited commentary. The real kicker, though? The steam room was supposed to be a place of relaxation, right? But with all the heat, the smells, and the social pressures to keep up with the gossip game, it's hard to see how it could actually be considered relaxing. Sure, some people probably enjoyed the idea of steaming away their stress, but in reality, it felt less like a wellness retreat and more like a test of your mental endurance. Could you survive the heat? Could you tolerate the endless smells? Could you outlast the social pressures of staying composed while literally sweating like a pig in front of strangers? If you could do all of that, you were basically a Roman bathing hero. As you stagger out of the steam room, drenched in sweat and barely hanging on, you might wonder, was this supposed to make me feel better? It's hard to tell. All you know is that the Romans truly committed to their wellness rituals, no matter how uncomfortable or smelly they got. At least, you can take comfort in the fact that, after all that, you can finally go home and collapse onto your clean, cool bed. Because at least you don't have to share that with anyone. Have you ever tried to scrub yourself with something that wasn't soap? Well, the Romans did that on purpose. Their bathhouses weren't exactly stocked with bottles of Suave body wash. Instead, they used a mixture of olive oil and scraping tools called a strigil. Yep, you'd cover yourself in oil and then scrape the excess off with a blunt metal tool, which sounds less like a spa treatment and more like an ancient medieval torture device. But it's fine. They had their own version of clean, and it was, well, sticky. Imagine this. You've just finished enduring the stifling heat of the caldarium, trying to make small talk with the guy next to you, whose personal space bubble has long since evaporated. You're sweating more than a gladiator at the Colosseum, and now it's time to clean yourself. You're led to a small, stone platform where an attendant pours olive oil over your body. This isn't your typical body scrub. It's a slick, slippery mess, but the Romans believed this would loosen up all the grime and make you ready for the next step, the Strigil. Now, before you ask, no, it's not a fancy new beauty treatment. A Strigil is a metal tool, shaped like a spoon, but with an edge that's blunt enough to make you question your life choices. You're going to use this thing to scrape the oil and sweat off your body. That's right, scrape it. It's not a soft scrub. It's a literal scraping motion, as if your body is a surface that needs to be buffed to perfection. You lie there, probably sweating more than ever, and someone proceeds to scrape away the oily mixture, taking with it the remnants of the bathhouse's communal grime, along with any dignity you might have had before you arrived. You've probably seen those modern-day exfoliating scrubs that claim to gently remove dead skin, but this was more like an ancient power wash. The idea was simple, to scrub off all the impurities, but the method, not so much. It's like taking a shovel to your skin and thinking, yep, that's the cleanest I've ever been. The Strigil would leave you with streaks of oil-covered skin, and if the attendant wasn't careful, a few scratches that made you wonder whether you'd just been to a spa or a medieval butcher's shop. And yet, this whole process was normal to the Romans. They didn't have soap, at least not soap the way we know it today. Instead, they relied on oil as a primary method of cleaning, and scraping it off with the Strigil was an important part of the ritual. This combination of oil, sweat, and scraping would leave your skin shiny in a way that made you question if cleanliness was the goal or if they were just trying to get you as slippery as possible. This was not about being soft and fresh. It was about getting the grime out, removing the oil, and leaving you with a layer of clean that still managed to feel a bit sticky. In fact, you might feel like you're less clean than when you entered, especially as the attendant scrapes away at your body, leaving behind a slippery sheen. But for the Romans, this was the height of personal hygiene. They didn't know about bacteria, germs, or how easily skin can be irritated by oils and metals. They just knew that this was their version of clean, and it worked for them. The olive oil would remove dirt, open up your pores, and maybe even make your skin feel a little smoother if you didn't mind the constant feeling of being covered in oil. The lack of soap wasn't just an oversight, it was a cultural difference. The Romans didn't have access to modern cleaning products, but they believed the oil helped purify them, especially when combined with the heat and scraping. The entire bathing process was less about hygiene as we know it today, and more about an overall ritual of cleansing that involved not just the body, but the mind. After all, in a bathhouse where gossip was rampant and senators were side by side with peasants, the act of cleansing yourself in front of others had to be something that went beyond just the physical. But let's be real, there were side effects to this olive oil and scraping method. For one, if you had any cuts or abrasions, that Strigil would feel like 1,000 tiny paper cuts on your skin. And of course, there was the issue of shared space. Imagine trying to relax in a bathhouse filled with sweaty people and then realizing that the oil and dirt that's being scraped off you is the same stuff that's floating around in the water. You can't help but wonder how clean you really are when the water you're soaking in has a bit of everyone else's oil, sweat, and, well, you get the idea. So while the Romans may have had their own method of scrubbing down, it wasn't exactly the serene, luxurious experience you might imagine. Instead of fluffy soaps and exfoliating scrubs, you got oil, strigils, and an ancient ritual that probably left you feeling cleanish, but also oddly shiny. Their version of hygiene was as much about the community and the ritual as it was about getting rid of the dirt. And at the end of the day, if you managed to escape without any scratches or unpleasant scrapes, you could call it a job well done. Just don't expect to feel fresh like you do after a nice long shower. The Romans had their own standards for what it meant to be clean. And trust me, they were a little different from ours. You know when you're at a spa, and there's that one person who's too eager to help, even though you didn't ask for it? Well, in the Roman bathhouse, that person was probably a bath attendant. These attendants were everywhere, constantly slapping you with towels, offering you more oil, and generally being way too hands-on. It's not exactly the Zen experience you'd expect when you think about Roman luxury. But then again, when's the last time you had a spa day where someone randomly slapped you with a towel and insisted you take a mud bath? In the bustling, steamy atmosphere of the Roman bathhouse, the attendants were always there, lurking in the background, waiting to swoop in with an uninvited touch. You could be peacefully relaxing in the warm waters, minding your own business, when suddenly, wham, a towel hits you across the back. "Time for your scrub," they'd say, with a bright smile, while you're still trying to get your bearings after the shock of the unexpected towel attack. Their job, to make sure you were as clean as possible, whether you liked it or not. And let's be real, nobody's asking for a towel snap at 10 a.m., let alone when you're trying to enjoy the little peace you get after the ordeal of getting into the bathhouse. The attendants weren't just giving you a gentle nudge to go clean up. Oh no, these people were persistent. They'd offer to rub more oil into your skin, which, considering the already lubed-up state of most bathers, was basically a slippery mess waiting to happen. And they weren't shy about it. If you hesitated or looked like you weren't paying attention, they'd come right up to you, practically drape the towel over your shoulders, and insist on a mud treatment. Imagine being in the middle of a relaxing bath and having someone come up to you, practically dumping a bucket of mud on your head, saying it was good for your skin. You didn't ask for this, but in the Roman bathhouse, it didn't really matter. Your discomfort wasn't high on their list of concerns. It wasn't just about the physical touch either. These attendants were constantly hovering, offering their services in the most intrusive way possible. Need to scrub your back? They've got you. Want to sit and relax in the frigidarium? They'll insist on giving you more oil. They were basically the original spa employees, but instead of the smooth Zen experience you might imagine in a modern spa, it was more of a high-pressure environment. At least today, you can politely decline a massage, but in the Roman bathhouse, if you didn't go along with it, you might just get slapped with a towel for good measure. The whole experience was less about relaxation and more about enduring the relentless enthusiasm of the attendants. And what made the whole situation more absurd was the attendant hierarchy in the bathhouse. You could tell who was important by how aggressively they treated you. The more senior attendants didn't just apply oil. They'd practically drag you into the next ritual. They weren't satisfied with just doing their job. They were there to make sure you were fully immersed in the bathhouse experience, whether you wanted to be or not. You might have been hoping for a quiet, solo bath experience, But the attendants had other ideas. It was their mission to ensure that you experienced every part of the bathing ritual, whether you had a preference for it or not. And then there's the whole personal space issue. In the Roman bathhouse, personal space didn't exist, especially when it came to the attendants. If you thought you could keep your distance and quietly enjoy your soak, think again. One moment, you're peacefully floating in the warm pool, and the next, there's a Roman attendant sitting beside you, offering unsolicited advice on how to improve your bathing experience. Need to rinse off? Here's a bucket of water right on top of you, whether you asked for it or not. Want to relax in the frigidarium? Guess who's joining you there to ensure you get just the right amount of cold to balance out the heat? But it wasn't all bad. If you could get past the constant interruptions, the attendants did know their stuff when it came to the technical aspects of bathing. After all, they were trained professionals, tasked with ensuring that everyone left the bathhouse feeling clean, even if it meant violating your personal space in the process. Their persistent efforts to scrub, scrape, and massage you into a state of bathhouse bliss were, in a way, a necessary evil. Still, it's safe to say that when you walked into the bathhouse, you were not going to be left alone. In fact, the more you tried to relax, the more the attendants seemed to think you needed help. Whether you were ready for it or not, you were going to get the full experience, slaps, scrubs, oils, and all. The Roman bathhouse was less a peaceful sanctuary and more a chaotic, overzealous spa run by attendants who were convinced that the only way to truly relax was by making you way too slippery for comfort. The Romans were pretty advanced for their time, but somehow they hadn't quite figured out the germ theory of disease. So while they were lounging in public baths, chatting with their friends, and pretending to be healthy, they were also sharing their germs. Who needs a cold when you have 1,000 years of bacterial evolution to entertain you? This is the ancient version of the flu season, but with a little more sweat and a lot more unexpected illnesses. You could leave feeling cleaner, sure, but you'd also leave with a nice batch of medieval diseases you didn't expect. When you think about the Roman bathhouse, it probably seems like an ancient wellness retreat. Sunlight streaming through grand windows, the air filled with the smell of herbal oils and hot stone. But beneath this picture of relaxation and cleanliness, there's a major problem lurking in the warm, murky waters: disease. Romans believed their communal baths were the ultimate way to stay healthy, but they had no concept of how germs actually spread. Their idea of clean didn't involve bacteria or viruses. No, for them, it was all about scrubbing off dirt and sweat, and perhaps a little bit of everything else, including illnesses they were unknowingly sharing. Let's set the scene. You've just stepped into the caldarium, the hot and steamy room where everyone is sweating profusely. It's thick with humidity, the air so hot and damp that it feels like it's smothering you. The sound of splashing water and casual chatter fills the room as bathers go about their business, scrubbing, gossiping, and rubbing down with oil. You're surrounded by dozens of other people, all soaking in the same water, none of them really thinking about what might be floating around in it. Of course, there's no such thing as chlorine, so there's no disinfecting happening here. Every inch of that water is shared by dozens, if not hundreds, of sweaty, oily bodies. You may be getting clean, but the water is most definitely not. The Romans had no understanding of bacteria or viruses, nothing close to our modern concept of germs. They believed the heat of the baths and the oils would somehow keep them free of sickness, as though sweating out the impurities would literally sweat out any potential diseases. Unfortunately, the science wasn't there, and those cozy bathhouse waters became a perfect breeding ground for all sorts of microscopic pests. From skin infections to respiratory illnesses, it was all just waiting to hitch a ride from one unsuspecting bather to another. In fact, you might have walked out of the bath feeling lighter and cleaner, but there's a very good chance you were carrying something extra with you that you didn't have when you walked in. Consider, for example, the likely transmission of respiratory diseases. You're in a closed, hot, humid space with dozens of others who are breathing heavily from the heat, talking, laughing, and splashing around. This was an ideal environment for airborne diseases to spread. It wasn't just the water you had to worry about. No, it was the thick, steamy air, rich with the breath of hundreds of other bathers. You could be leaving with more than just a clean feeling. You might also be taking home a cold or the early stages of a respiratory infection. And that's assuming you didn't catch something more serious, like tuberculosis or a form of pneumonia, which was far too common in crowded, warm spaces. And don't forget about skin diseases. While the Romans were busy slathering themselves with olive oil and using the Strigil to scrape off sweat and grime, they were also unknowingly scraping off some very nasty pathogens. A small cut, a scrape, or just sensitive skin was all it took to introduce bacteria into your system. With no understanding of hygiene or infection prevention, bathers were exposed to everything in those murky waters. What was supposed to be a cleansing experience could very well have turned into a breeding ground for rashes, boils, or worse. The bathhouse also acted as a social space, so people of all social classes and walks of life gathered in the same public bath. Think about it. Peasants, gladiators, senators, and merchants, all mingling and sharing the same space. While it may have been a place to network or get a little gossip in, it was also a prime environment for cross-contamination. If you're a senator's son stepping into the bath next to a gladiator covered in dirt and blood, it's not exactly a sterile environment. In fact, it's the complete opposite. You're stepping into a petri dish of bodily fluids, oil, sweat, and of course, whatever else other bathers brought in with them. This kind of exposure to multiple people, all in the same space, definitely increased the chances of passing illnesses back and forth. Now let's talk about the after effects. It wasn't just the illnesses that were spread within the bathhouse, it was the fact that those germs could follow you home. Think of a virus that you catch in a crowded space. You've soaked, you've sweat, and you've cleaned yourself off, but now you're carrying something invisible on your body. Since the Romans didn't have soap or proper sanitization methods, they were far more likely to leave the bathhouse carrying whatever illness they might have been exposed to. This wasn't just about feeling clean. This was about being a walking carrier of diseases that could spread through the city like wildfire. In the end, the Romans may have had their version of wellness and cleanliness, but it was sadly lacking in the knowledge of germs and bacteria. While they saw the bathhouse as the ultimate place to cleanse their bodies and minds, they were completely unaware of the invisible dangers lurking in the water and the air. A visit to the bathhouse might have left you feeling fresh and rejuvenated, but there's a strong chance you'd be taking home more than just the smell of olive oil and hot stone. If you're going to bathe in ancient Rome, you had better do it right. Otherwise, you might end up in the lukewarm baths, which, no surprise here, weren't as nice as the hot or cold baths. The Romans were all about extremes, and if you were caught in the middle, You weren't getting that same luxurious bath experience. This is like going to a fancy restaurant and being handed a lukewarm cup of coffee instead of the fresh brew you ordered. The tepidarium, or lukewarm room, was the bathhouse equivalent of a meh experience. If you think about the ancient Roman bathhouse, you likely picture people luxuriating in the hot, steamy caldarium or enjoying the refreshing chill of the frigidarium after a long, hot soak. But the tepidarium was the bathhouse's awkward middle child, neither too hot nor too cold. It's like the nothing special section of the bathhouse. Imagine preparing for a blissful soak in a rejuvenating hot pool only to find yourself dumped into a lukewarm bath that doesn't quite hit the spot. Not cold enough to refresh you, but not hot enough to relax your muscles. You're stuck in an uncomfortable in-between with no real purpose other than to help you transition from one extreme to another. So why was this room even necessary? The Romans believed that alternating between extreme temperatures could benefit the body, improving circulation and overall health. The caldarium was great for opening pores and sweating out impurities, while the frigidarium helped close those pores and give you a refreshing shock to the system. But the tepidarium? Well, it was supposed to be a resting room, a way to gently transition your body from the sweltering heat of the caldarium to the cool relief of the frigidarium without shocking your system too much. In theory, it sounds like a nice, balanced middle ground, but in reality, it felt like you were left waiting for something that never quite arrived. This lukewarm experience wasn't just about comfort, it was about status. The Romans took their bathing rituals very seriously, and the tepidarium was, frankly, the lowest tier of the bathing experience. Everyone wanted to get into the caldarium, or the frigidarium, the rooms where the real action happened. The tepidarium, however, was often the forgotten room, the one that people passed through reluctantly on their way to the real baths. It's like going to a fancy hotel with a pool, but instead of the glamorous infinity pool with a view, you're stuck in a slightly warm kiddie pool with no character. Imagine this. You've spent a good amount of time in the hot room, sweating it out and relaxing under the intense heat, and now you're ready for the cool relief of the frigidarium. You're thinking, I can't wait to cool down and feel that refreshing chill on my skin. But then, instead of a sharp, cold shock, you find yourself in a room that's just lukewarm, not hot enough to be comforting, and not cold enough to wake you up. The air is sticky, the water is tepid, and instead of feeling energized and revived, you feel sluggish and uncomfortable, like you're stuck in this weird limbo. And the worst part? There's no escape. No clear transition to either the hot or cold bath that you were hoping for. You're left sitting there, feeling more uncomfortable than rejuvenated. To make matters worse, the tepidarium was also a place where people spent the least amount of time. It wasn't where the gossip and socializing happened. That was reserved for the caldarium or the communal areas of the bathhouse. Instead, the tepidarium was where you'd sit around, sweating just enough to feel uncomfortable, not hot enough to relax, and certainly not cold enough to feel revived. It wasn't a place for fun or luxury. It was more of a transit zone, the pit stop in the bathing process. If the bathhouse was a journey, the tepidarium was the pit stop you could have easily skipped. For the Romans, who loved their extreme temperatures, the tepidarium didn't fit into their mindset. The allure of extreme heat or refreshing cold was what made bathing truly luxurious. The tepidarium? It was like the leftovers of the bathhouse world. It had no clear purpose other than to be an uncomfortable buffer between the two extremes. No one went to the bathhouse to linger in the lukewarm zone, and nobody bragged about spending their time in the tepidarium. You could talk about the heated experiences of the caldarium or the bracing chill of the frigidarium, but no one was ever eager to recount their tepid adventures. In Rome, modesty wasn't exactly in the cards. Everyone was practically naked, and it didn't matter if you were a senator or a peasant. This wasn't a "we'll let you keep your towel on" kind of place. No, it was more like, "Hey, why don't you drop your toga and come on in?" Bathhouses were where you'd shed your inhibitions along with your clothes. At least today you can keep your towel on and your pride intact. In the world of ancient Rome, social barriers didn't just vanish at the bathhouse. They were stripped away entirely. Whether you were a lowly slave or a powerful senator, once you entered the bathhouse, you were all reduced to one thing: bathers. This was a world where your social status didn't matter. The toga, that symbol of Roman identity and power, was left at the door, and all that remained was your naked body, glistening with sweat and oil. It was the ultimate equalizer, a place where you couldn't hide behind your rank, wealth, or title. Everyone was on the same playing field, whether you liked it or not. For Romans, nudity in the bathhouse wasn't a big deal. It wasn't seen as shameful or inappropriate. It was just natural. The bathhouse was a place to relax, socialize, and cleanse yourself, and the absence of clothes was just part of the experience. It was a communal affair, and modesty simply didn't have a place in this setting. But can you imagine walking into a space where everyone is completely bare? There you are, standing in front of a group of strangers, probably feeling uncomfortable, hoping no one notices your sweaty palms, and wondering just how many people have been in the water before you. You've just crossed into a world where personal space is in short supply, and every bit of self-consciousness you had has been stripped away along with your toga. Once you're inside, the social dynamics of the bathhouse are clear. This is where the rules of Roman society get temporarily suspended. You could bump elbows with senators, chat with merchants, and gossip with slaves. Everyone from the highest to the lowest class was in the same sweaty boat. The concept of personal space or privacy didn't exist here, and neither did the usual social barriers. No one was looking at your status. They were too busy talking about the latest gladiator match or how the emperor's mistress was up to no good. It's like a modern-day locker room, but with more gossip and a lot more body oil. And there, in the midst of all this, was you, naked and sweating, trying not to make eye contact with anyone while simultaneously navigating the weird and wonderful world of Roman communal life. But there's a twist to this communal nudity: the sheer awkwardness of it all. Everyone is vulnerable, and even the most powerful of Romans couldn't hide behind their robes once they entered the bath. While you might think that in such an intimate, exposed setting, the Romans would engage in deep philosophical discussions or serious political negotiations, the truth is much more entertaining. People didn't bathe to reflect on life's big questions. They bathed to gossip. The bathhouse was the original social media, a place where you could hear about all the latest scandals, gladiator victories, and maybe, just maybe, how someone was trying to overthrow the current emperor. So there you were, naked and listening to juicy bits of gossip, sharing the space with some of the most powerful people in Rome, and thinking to yourself, how did I get here? The idea of privacy was practically unheard of. Imagine stepping into the frigidarium, hoping to cool off after the intense heat of the caldarium, and finding yourself standing next to a senator who just asked you if you saw his latest chariot race victory. You try to maintain some semblance of dignity, but at this point, it's clear. Your body's not your own anymore. You're just a bather in a sea of bathers, all equal in their lack of clothing, all equally vulnerable to the scrutiny of anyone within earshot. It's the ultimate test of your ability to keep your composure in a space where everyone is far more focused on the experience than on you. But to be fair, the Romans weren't the first to introduce communal nudity in bathing. What made their approach unique was how deeply integrated this practice was into their social structure. For the Romans, it wasn't just about cleaning your body. It was about participating in a shared, open, and vulnerable ritual. The bathhouse was a place where you could shed your social mask, let down your guard, and perhaps engage with others in a way that wasn't possible in the more formal parts of life. The nude body was a symbol of togetherness, not a source of embarrassment. You weren't just washing yourself, you were washing off the pretenses of class, rank, and wealth. In the end, the Roman bathhouse wasn't just a space for personal hygiene. It was a ritualistic, social, and cultural hub where modesty went to die. Here, clothes didn't make the man, sweat did. You were all just naked Romans, sharing in the experience of vulnerability, relaxation, and gossip, as free from societal boundaries as you were from your clothes. So next time you step into a bath or spa, remember, at least you can keep your towel on and your personal space intact, something the Romans never worried about in their totally immodest bathhouses. Now, let's dive into the delicate subject of who you're sharing the water with. The bathhouses were meant to be communal, but that doesn't mean everyone was invited to the VIP bath. No, there were social rules. If you were a rich senator, you could enjoy a luxurious bath in a separate room with a view, while the common folk were stuck in the crowded areas, elbow to elbow with strangers. It was basically the equivalent of having a VIP section at the club, except the club had no music and smelled like fish sauce. The worst part? You never really knew who was lurking around you. Was that person a senator or just a dude with a really strong opinion on philosophy? In ancient Rome, class distinction wasn't just a matter of who sat where in the Senate. It was everywhere, and it was felt in the bathhouse. Bathhouses, for all their social and cultural significance, still adhered to the rules of Roman society. While the baths were public, the spaces within them were far from equal. The wealthier classes, particularly the elite senators and the upper crust, had their own dedicated sections of the bathhouse where they could bathe in relative peace, away from the sweat-drenched, gossiping masses. Imagine entering the bathhouse, expecting to relax and unwind, only to realize that the best pools were reserved for the high-ranking. Meanwhile, you, just a mere commoner, were left to swim with the hoi polloi in overcrowded, steamy rooms, hoping no one accidentally bumps into you. The concept of privacy didn't really exist in these spaces. You weren't just sharing water, you were sharing personal space with everyone. For the common folk, the bathhouse was more of a social survival test. You'd squeeze into crowded corners, trying not to get too close to anyone, but in a room packed with people, this was pretty much impossible. And just as in any large, chaotic environment, you'd soon find yourself shoulder to shoulder with a stranger, someone you might otherwise never speak to. But in the bathhouse, it didn't matter if you were a baker, a soldier, or a shopkeeper. You were all naked and sweating, all equally human in the eyes of the steamy, communal experience. And while everyone mingled, the real luxury of the bathhouse was the VIP experience, reserved for the higher-ups. Senators and other elites were able to enjoy their baths in private chambers, away from the prying eyes of the public. It's like a modern-day club with a velvet rope, except there's no dress code, just wealth. The Roman elite were often given the best treatment in the bathhouse. They'd have access to the finest pools, the hottest steam rooms, and perhaps even personal attendants who would make sure that no commoner accidentally entered their space. It was the ancient Roman equivalent of sitting in the private lounge of an exclusive spa. You'd get a nice view, an uninterrupted experience, and you could avoid the crowds. Just imagine you're in your luxurious Roman bath, sipping on watered-down wine, thinking about your influence in Roman society. Meanwhile, the average person was elbow-deep in the communal waters, fending off awkward encounters. The social rules of the bathhouse didn't just separate the elites from the masses physically, it separated them in how they interacted. The elites might have spent their time talking politics, gossiping about the latest Senate decree, or debating philosophy in a somewhat more refined manner than the common folk. For the regular bathers, however, the conversations often revolved around a mix of gladiator gossip, rumors, and local events. In the end, everyone shared the same space, but the conversations were worlds apart. The senator in the corner might discuss the latest political maneuver with his fellow elite, while the man next to you might be explaining his extremely detailed opinion on why philosophy is just a long-winded excuse to avoid doing actual work. And yet, despite all the separation and social stratification, there were moments when those lines were blurred. The bathhouse, being a communal space, brought together people of different walks of life. A slave might serve a senator in the baths, offering oils and towels, while also trying to avoid eye contact with the peasants around them. The power dynamics were complex, and the bathhouse was one of the few places where the barriers between classes seemed to dissolve, albeit temporarily. That's when the real question arose. Who were you actually bathing with? Was the man next to you a rich merchant, or just another guy with questionable hygiene habits? The only way to really know was to talk, but even then it wasn't always clear where someone stood in the social hierarchy. Everyone shared the same pools, but not everyone shared the same story. The bathhouse wasn't just a place for cleansing the body. It was a place for cleansing social norms too, if only for a moment. The communal bathing experience might have been crowded, uncomfortable, and awkward, but it was also a rare instance where the rigid lines of Roman class could be temporarily softened, if only by shared sweat. Whether you were a senator or a street vendor, you were, for a brief time, just another Roman bather, naked, sweaty, and vulnerable in the same water. But when you left the bath, the lines were drawn again. The Senate would reconvene, the peasants would go back to their market stalls, and the social status you carried would become apparent once more. So as you exited the bathhouse, you were reminded, the only thing that separated the rich from the poor, the powerful from the powerless, was the towel you wrapped around yourself afterward. In the bathhouse, everyone shared the water, but not the same privileges. Every bathhouse had attendants who made sure things were running smoothly, and let me tell you, they had quite the job. These were the people who were there to make sure that no one drowned, that oil was applied correctly, and that the heat was just the right level of discomfort. But let's be real, some of them were probably just there to watch the chaos unfold. Imagine your job being to slap oil on sweaty, naked people and then scrape them down with a metal tool. It's a thankless job, and you can bet the bath attendants had a whole lot of power over how relaxing your experience would be. In the Roman bathhouse, the attendants weren't just a minor part of the experience, they were the gatekeepers to your bathing adventure. Their role was crucial, not just for ensuring that the bathhouse maintained its high standards of hygiene, however loosely that term was defined, but for making sure everything ran smoothly in the sweltering chaos that could easily turn a simple bath into an awkward social nightmare. Without the attendants, there might have been more slipping, falling, and accidental drownings than anyone cared to admit. But the attendants were also there to keep things moving, to make sure people followed the unspoken rules of the bathhouse. They were, in essence, both the peacekeepers and the potential disruptors of the experience. These attendants were typically assigned specific tasks, and there was no room for laziness. They had to make sure the pool stayed at the right temperature, because let's be honest, no one wants to step into a pool that's too hot or too cold. The caldarium had to be just the right level of unbearable heat to make you sweat, but not so hot you felt like you were melting away. If the temperature was off, people would be in an uproar. And who do you think they'd blame? That's right, the attendants. So they were constantly checking the temperature, keeping an eye on the crowds, and ensuring that the bathhouse experience didn't devolve into a free-for-all. Then, of course, there's the oil. One of the more peculiar aspects of Roman bathing involved the liberal application of olive oil to your body before being scraped down with a strigil. And guess who was in charge of making sure you were sufficiently slathered? The attendants. They'd come around with a jug of oil, making sure you were covered head to toe, ready to experience the luxury of being scraped down like a slab of meat. The oil was supposed to loosen dirt, grease, and other impurities, preparing you for a thorough scrubbing. But while it may sound indulgent, it wasn't exactly spa-like. Having a complete stranger pour oil on your bare skin, then scrape it off with a blunt tool, was a far cry from the soothing aromatherapy massages we've come to expect today. It was awkward at best, and probably uncomfortable at worst. But the real kicker? The attendants had the power to control how much comfort you'd get out of the entire experience. They could be as gentle or as rough as they wanted with the oil application and the scraping process. If they decided to be a bit heavy-handed, you'd find yourself wincing through the process, and if they were in a bad mood, well, good luck avoiding that extra aggressive scraping session. Essentially, your experience in the bathhouse was entirely in their hands, and there was very little you could do about it. Sure, you could try to avoid them, but there was always the risk that they'd sneak up on you with a towel snap or a sudden plunk of oil that made you feel even more vulnerable than before. The attendants' power extended beyond just the physical treatments. They were also the social moderators of the bathhouse. Imagine trying to enjoy a relaxing soak in the warm waters, only for an attendant to step in and remind you that you needed to move along to the next area. This wasn't a space to linger for too long, especially if you were a commoner. The attendants were there to ensure the high-ranking patrons, senators, generals, and other important figures got the most luxurious experience possible. If you were in the way of a senator's favorite pool, you could bet the attendant would be the first one to politely, or not so politely, ask you to move. They were the unofficial social gatekeepers, making sure that the bathing ritual went off without a hitch while also managing the flow of bathers. In a way, the attendants were the bouncers of the bathhouse. But let's not forget the most fun part, the drama. As much as the attendants had a vital role in keeping order and making sure the bathhouse stayed functional, there was always a chance that a little chaos would emerge. Between the hot, sticky atmosphere, the naked bathers, and the intense social dynamics, things could get tense. Perhaps an attendant accidentally spilled oil on someone's favorite toga, or maybe they were a little too forceful with the Strigil and left a bather with some uncomfortable scratches. Whether they were being overly enthusiastic or just downright rude, there were plenty of moments when the bathhouse staff could tip from helpful to hostile. And let's be honest, a grumpy bath attendant is a real buzzkill in a space that's already packed with social tension and sweaty bodies. In the end, the bathhouse attendants were both a blessing and a curse. Without them, the bathhouse might have descended into chaos, people slipping around, oil everywhere, the water boiling over, and possibly more drownings than the Roman Empire was prepared to deal with. But with them, the experience could range from a serene, therapeutic soak to an awkward, uncomfortable affair that left you questioning just how much personal space a bather really needs. The real mystery wasn't just in the baths themselves, but in the attendants who had the power to make or break your experience, and it was a power they didn't hesitate to wield. Bathhouses weren't just for cleanliness and relaxation. They were prime real estate for gossip. Picture this. You're dripping wet, sitting in the warm, steamy water, and suddenly you hear a juicy tidbit about a local politician's affair or a new gladiator victory. The bathhouse was the place to catch up on the latest scandals and slander. Everyone had a story to tell, and it didn't matter if it was true or not. If you were naked in a public space, you were probably ready to spill your own secrets while hearing everyone else's. In the Roman bathhouse, privacy wasn't really a thing. Not only were you physically exposed, but your social and political life was too. Whether you were an elite senator or a working-class tradesman, once you stepped into the bathhouse, you entered a world where personal boundaries seemed to evaporate along with the steam. In this communal space, conversation flowed as freely as the water, and gossip, of course, was the most abundant thing. People weren't just there to relax and get clean. They were there to share and hear the latest whispers of scandal, triumph, and misfortune. Whether you wanted to or not, you were going to hear about that senator's latest affair, the gladiator's heroic or not-so-heroic performance, or heaven forbid, your neighbor's embarrassing incident that had somehow become the talk of the town. In a way, the bathhouse was the Twitter of ancient Rome, except instead of typing behind a screen, you were sitting shoulder to shoulder with the people you'd probably never choose to share a private moment with, discussing everything from the latest political gossip to which family was having trouble with their slaves. The most shocking part, you had to listen. Everyone was sharing what they had learned, and you could bet that the person sitting next to you, naked and sweating, had just as much to say as the person across the room. And since you were all practically in the same boat or pool, you couldn't help but listen to the constant murmur of half-truths and salacious stories. But here's the twist. You were just as likely to be spilling your own secrets as you were hearing someone else's. The bathhouse wasn't just about soaking in warm water. It was about letting go of the guards you usually had up. Being in a space where everyone was naked and vulnerable made people more inclined to be honest, or at least more willing to share what they thought was honest. You might have walked in thinking you were just there to scrub off the day's grime, but before you knew it, you'd be caught up in the latest gossip about your own life, or worse, someone else's life. And if you weren't careful, you might leave with a whole new set of rumors about yourself that you didn't know you'd started. The beauty of Roman bathhouse gossip was how easily it spread, because bathhouses were communal spaces where everyone from slaves to senators came together to relax. The information had a way of circulating quickly. It was like being at the epicenter of a giant, ever-changing game of telephone. One person would whisper something to another, who would then pass it along to someone else, and suddenly the whole bathhouse knew the juicy details. Whether it was about a local politician's mysterious disappearance or the scandalous behavior of a well-known family, the bathhouse was the ideal setting for these stories to grow and evolve. It wasn't just the bathers who were involved in the gossip game either. Bathhouse attendants, who were always in the thick of things, had their ears to the ground. They might have had a slightly different role than the average bather, but they certainly didn't miss out on the opportunity to be involved in the social chatter. An attendant could easily overhear something interesting and pass it along to others, ensuring that the rumors and stories spread even more quickly. In fact, some of the most reliable bathhouse gossip might have been passed down by these attendants who were experts in the art of listening while appearing to be busy with their duties. The way gossip traveled in the bathhouse was almost like an underground network. It wasn't always based on facts. Sometimes it was just a kernel of truth stretched into a full-blown scandal. You might hear that a senator was having an affair, but by the time the story passed through a few different bathers, the affair might turn into an elaborate tale of betrayal and backstabbing involving the emperor himself. The bathhouse was where stories grew, often shifting in dramatic ways with each telling. Who knew what was real and what wasn't? By the time the tale reached the ears of a bather who wasn't even involved, it might have become so exaggerated that it had little resemblance to the original truth. But for all the wild gossip and unverified tales, the bathhouse was also a place of connection. Through all the sweaty, naked chatter, bonds were formed. Relationships, both friendly and otherwise, were forged in the steamy depths of those communal pools. Bathhouse gossip might have been filled with half-truths and embellished stories, but it also brought people together. It broke down the walls between classes and gave everyone a chance to talk freely, share information, and sometimes even laugh at their own discomfort. So while you might have left the bathhouse with more gossip than you bargained for, you also left with a deeper understanding of the people around you. After all, who else could you gossip with, if not the people who shared that strange, naked, and soaking part of your day? It's safe to say that ancient Roman baths weren't exactly the smell of fresh flowers and lavender. Instead, it was a mix of sweat, herbs, hot stone, and, well, other things. The Romans would sometimes use scented oils to mask the smell of body odor, but let's not kid ourselves. It wasn't all about pleasant aromas. Imagine a blend of incense burning next to the strong scent of armpits and a little too much fish sauce. It's like that one friend who overdoes it with the cologne, but somehow the smell just lingers. The truth is, the bathhouse was a lot of things: relaxing, social, even therapeutic. But fragrant wasn't necessarily one of them. Sure, the Romans tried their best to make the space smell pleasant by burning incense and using perfumed oils. But the reality of communal bathing in ancient times was far from luxurious in the olfactory department. Imagine a hot room filled with dozens, maybe even hundreds, of people all sweating and rubbing olive oil into their skin. There's the warmth of the caldarium, where the air is thick and moist with heat, creating a sauna-like atmosphere. And in this steamy, crowded room, the smell of human sweat quickly becomes the dominant scent, overshadowing even the most carefully crafted perfumes and oils. You'd think that after all the work they did to make the bathhouse a grand experience, the Romans would have figured out how to keep it from smelling like a sweaty meat locker. But nope, the heat just made everything worse. But it wasn't just the sweat. The Romans also used a variety of oils, which, while designed to keep the skin soft, often contributed to an even heavier scent. Olive oil, in particular, was the go-to, slathered liberally on every bather's body before the infamous Strigil scraped it off. The process of rubbing oil on your body and then scraping it off didn't just remove dirt. It left you covered in a slick, greasy layer that could easily attract dirt, and perhaps even the occasional stray hair from another bather. As a result, the oils would mix with sweat, grime, and anything else floating around in the water, creating a pungent cocktail of body oils and odors. But that wasn't all. The use of perfumes and scented oils in the bathhouse was common, and many Romans loved to make themselves smell as pleasant as possible in the midst of all the sweat. They used a variety of spices and oils, cinnamon, lavender, myrrh, and rose, hoping to cover up the musk of their bodies. However, even the finest oils couldn't fully mask the fact that you were sharing a pool with hundreds of people who hadn't seen a proper bath in days. The result? A strange clash between overpowering floral scents and the earthy, raw smells of sweat, oil, and body odor. Imagine walking into a room that's supposed to smell like a garden, only to realize the garden has been neglected for a month, and a few wild animals have taken refuge in it. That's what the Romans were dealing with in the bathhouse, and let's not forget the incense. The Romans burned it to create an atmosphere of luxury and relaxation, but in a space where sweat, oil, and human bodies are packed together in close quarters, the incense didn't exactly have the desired effect. Instead of creating a calming aromatic environment, the thick smoke of burning frankincense or myrrh often just added to the confusion of smells in the bathhouse. Rather than elevating the experience, it could sometimes make the air feel suffocating, as if you were trapped inside a cloud of pungent perfume. Instead of a serene escape, the air felt heavier, thick with the smell of incense battling the overpowering scent of bodies. Of course, the bathhouses weren't just places of relaxation, they were also social spaces. People were there to gossip, network, and discuss politics, and this communal environment meant that you were exposed to more than just the physical smells of the bath. As bathers engaged in conversation, their breath, laden with whatever food or drink they'd consumed before the bath, would contribute to the atmosphere. Did you eat garlic before entering? Well, that's going to mingle with the sweat in the air. Had a little too much fish with dinner? You can bet your breath will add to the fragrant mix. All in all, the bathhouse became a sensory overload, a place where the smells weren't just from the oils or sweat, but from the food, the drink, and the close proximity to other bathers. In the end, the Romans were truly ahead of their time in many ways, but when it came to controlling odors in the bathhouse, they hadn't quite perfected the art of cleanliness. Sure, they had their oils, their perfumes, and their incense, but no amount of fragrance could fully cover up the smells of hundreds of sweaty, naked bodies all packed together in a humid, steamy environment. Bathing was a communal experience, and with that came a sensory overload that was part of the ritual. In the Roman bathhouse, the experience wasn't just about cleanliness or relaxation. It was about embracing the human condition in all its sweaty, oily, and occasionally stinky glory. So the next time you step into a modern spa with its soft smells of lavender and eucalyptus, remember that the Romans had a different kind of bathing experience, one where the smells were just as much a part of the process as the soaking and scrubbing. It was a sensory overload of oils, sweat, perfume, and body odor, all swirled together in a steamy, fragrant mess that somehow worked. After all, if you could survive the smells of a Roman bath, you could handle anything life threw at you. Now we have to address the main event, the cleaning. But forget about soap and scrubbing brushes. The Romans didn't have those luxuries. Instead, they used a tool called a strigil, which is basically a metal scraper. You'd slather yourself in olive oil and then scrape off the dirt, sweat, and, let's be honest, probably half your skin. It was supposed to help exfoliate, but in reality, it probably left you with a bruised ego and a newfound appreciation for modern loofahs. But hey, at least it was more natural than modern-day exfoliating scrubs, right? The strigil was the Roman version of a deep scrub, but there was nothing gentle about it. Imagine this. You're covered in a slick layer of olive oil. Your skin is now a sticky, oily mess, and it's time for the strigil to work its magic. This metal scraper wasn't there to pamper you. Oh no, this was serious business. The process involved scraping the oil off your body, along with everything else it had loosened up. So yes, that means the dirt, sweat, and, if you were lucky, any dead skin that had been hanging around. The problem? It wasn't exactly gentle. The strigil wasn't designed with your comfort in mind. It was a tool meant for scraping, and scrape it did. If you weren't used to it, you might leave the bath with more than just glowing skin. You might leave with some bruises too. The question was, did it really exfoliate your skin, or was it just an ancient form of tough love? At first glance, the strigil may have looked like something out of a medieval torture chamber. Picture a blunt, curved piece of metal, which when dragged across your skin, scraped away all the accumulated grime and oils. No sponges, no soft brushes, just a raw metal tool dragging across your body. When you first experienced it, you might have thought, is this really necessary? The answer was always yes, necessary because the Romans had no soap. The oil and strigil were their substitute. The oil was meant to loosen up dirt and sweat, and the scraping was to remove it, leaving you feeling hopefully fresh and clean. But let's talk about what exactly was left behind after the process. The strigil wasn't the only thing that got scraped off. Once it started dragging along your skin, it felt like it was pulling up everything, and not just the stuff you wanted to get rid of. Sure, it took away the dirt and grime, but it also probably yanked off a fair amount of skin in the process. If you had sensitive skin, or let's face it, any skin at all, you might have been left with a feeling of skin irritation or soreness. The olive oil helped, but it was still a harsh scrub. The strigil was doing its job, but you might have been wondering, is this really worth it? Does it have to hurt this much to get clean? In a way, though, it was all part of the Roman bathing experience. The strigil wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about the ritual of it all. In Rome, bathing was a process that involved all your senses. It wasn't just about getting clean. It was about participating in a shared cultural tradition, one that involved rituals and tools like the strigil. If you were truly part of the experience, you had to embrace it all. The heat, the sweat, the scrubbing, and yes, even the painful scraping with the strigil. The process was also an exercise in trust. You had an attendant, probably a stranger, scraping you down in a shared space. It wasn't like today, where you could DIY your own exfoliation in the privacy of your own home. No, Roman bathers relied on someone else to scrub away their grime, and that someone was likely very familiar with the art of scrubbing hard enough to remove layers of skin. And while the Strigil might have been harsh, it was probably one of the most effective ways the Romans had to exfoliate and cleanse themselves without modern tools like brushes, sponges, or loofahs. But let's be real, modern exfoliating products have come a long way since the Roman Strigil. You can buy scrubs, lotions, and body brushes that gently remove dead skin without leaving you feeling sore. The Romans didn't have that luxury. For them, the Strigil was their ticket to skin that felt fresh, smooth, and clean by their standards. It might not have been pleasant, and it certainly wasn't refined, but it got the job done, and the result was a body as shiny as an oil-slicked stone statue. By the end of the process, though, you weren't just left with clean skin. You were part of something larger, a shared experience in the bathhouse, where every person, no matter their class or background, went through the same ritual. The Strigil wasn't just about cleaning your body. It was about immersing yourself in Roman culture, understanding the importance of community, and learning to live with a little bit of discomfort in the pursuit of cleanliness. And while modern exfoliating scrubs might not require strenuous scraping, maybe we could all learn a little something from the Romans. The beauty of embracing the mess, the discomfort, and the shared human experience of cleansing, body and soul. You'd think that by the time the Romans were building bathhouses, they'd have perfected their plumbing, but oh no. While they had some advanced systems, like aqueducts, clean water wasn't always a given. Sometimes, the water would be so murky from all the bodies that you'd need a brave soul, probably an attendant, to dive in and clean it out before the next group arrived. And if you thought your gym's water fountain was sketchy, imagine bathing in that water. The Romans were undeniably advanced for their time, and their engineering feats are still admired today, especially when it comes to their plumbing systems. They had aqueducts that stretched across miles of land, bringing fresh water from distant sources into cities, ensuring that the bathhouses had a steady supply of water to keep everything flowing. But here's the catch. Despite all their ingenuity, the Romans weren't exactly known for maintaining pristine, crystal-clear bathwater. It wasn't as simple as opening a faucet and letting fresh, clean water rush in. Instead, it was a constant battle to keep the water usable, and the cleanliness of that water often depended on how well the attendants managed it. In the grand scheme of things, the Romans built impressive systems to transport water to the bathhouses, but once it was there, keeping it clean wasn't always a top priority. The bathhouses were large, crowded places, and water was shared by hundreds, sometimes thousands of bathers. Imagine for a moment what that would look like. You're stepping into the caldarium, the hottest part of the bath, where people are sweating, bathing, and sitting for long periods. The water gets murky from sweat, oil, dirt, and let's be honest, probably a few other bodily substances. After hours of this, the water would start to resemble something closer to a swamp than a refreshing bath. And if that wasn't enough, there were no filters or pumps to keep the water circulating, so any debris that floated to the top might just stay there until the next batch of bathers arrived. But the most shocking parts, the bathhouse attendants, those hard-working souls who had to make sure the bathhouse didn't descend into chaos, were the ones tasked with cleaning the water. It was their job to dive into the pools and remove whatever floating grime had accumulated throughout the day. And it wasn't just a matter of scooping out debris with a net or throwing in a cleaning tablet, a luxury the Romans didn't have. No, it was much more hands-on than that. If the water got too murky, someone had to get into the pool and scrub down the bottom or even remove the thick layer of oils and dirt that had settled in the depths. Imagine having to wade through murky water, scraping off the gunk of hundreds of bathers just to make it somewhat usable for the next crowd. It's safe to say the bathhouse attendants earned their keep. This wasn't a glamorous job by any means. And let's not forget about the quality of the water itself. The aqueducts may have brought fresh water into the city, but by the time it reached the bathhouse, it was far from pristine. The Romans weren't exactly concerned with the concept of clean water as we understand it today. They didn't know about bacteria or germs, so the idea of contaminated water wasn't part of their worldview. What they cared about was keeping the water hot, keeping the flow constant, and making sure the baths stayed open for business. If the water got dirty, they'd clean it as best they could, but as long as the temperature and flow were right, they considered it good enough. Imagine then stepping into these murky pools where the water was constantly reused throughout the day. You'd walk in, hoping for a relaxing soak, only to find yourself submerged in water that had been shared by hundreds of people. It was a communal experience, yes, but also a dirty one. While the Roman baths were meant to provide relaxation and rejuvenation, there was always the lingering feeling that the cleanliness of the water wasn't quite up to modern standards. The idea of germ-free filtered water simply didn't exist in Roman times, so you could be soaking in more than just hot water and oils. You might be soaking in a whole community of other people's impurities. So while the Romans may have been pioneers in many ways, they certainly had their limitations when it came to bathhouse hygiene. They may have had some of the most advanced plumbing systems of their time, but when it came to keeping that water clean, let's just say the battle for fresh, clear bathwater was one that never quite ended. If you wanted to enjoy a Roman bath, you had to accept that at some point you were going to be soaking in murky, shared water. And if that wasn't enough, there was always the possibility that after hours of use, the attendants would have to dive in and clean out whatever else had made its way into the pool. It wasn't pretty, but it was the Roman way, where the water might not be fresh, but the company sure was interesting. In the end, the Roman bathhouses were an incredible feat of engineering, but they were not exactly built with pristine hygiene in mind. Sure, they had the best plumbing system for their time, but once that water hit the pool, it was an entirely different story. So the next time you step into a clean, modern pool, remember the Romans, who might have had the innovation but lacked the filtration. You can thank your modern water treatment systems for not having to dive into a murky, sweat-filled pool before your next swim. In ancient Rome, networking wasn't about LinkedIn or cold emails. It was about soaking in the same bathwater as the people you wanted to impress. Want to get ahead in Roman society? You'd have to scrub your way into some influential conversations. It wasn't just about getting clean. It was about getting connected. Forget casual coffee meetings. Roman power moves happened in hot tubs and saunas. Want to rise up in the ranks? First, you'll need to master the art of small talk while you're both dripping with sweat, surrounded by naked strangers. The bathhouse was more than just a place for personal hygiene. It was a social institution. If you were serious about climbing the social ladder in ancient Rome, the bathhouse was where you made your connections. It was the equivalent of a modern-day networking event, but with far more exposure, literally. Senators, generals, merchants, and slaves all gathered in these communal spaces where social rank was stripped away, along with their clothes. In these hot, steamy rooms, it didn't matter if you were wealthy or poor. Everyone was on the same playing field when it came to the bathing ritual. But while everyone was physically equal in their nudity, the conversations happening in the baths were anything but. Imagine trying to have a meaningful conversation with a powerful senator while you're both dripping with sweat and lounging in warm water. It's an intimate setting. There's no barrier of formal attire or stiff decorum. Instead, you're forced to engage on a much more personal level. The conversation might start about the weather, as all good small talk does, but soon enough, the bathhouse environment leads to more substantial discussions, like politics, business, or military exploits. It was the perfect place to form alliances, spread rumors, and, of course, network. The Roman bathhouse wasn't just for the plebeians. The elite, especially, understood the importance of making connections in these communal spaces. If you wanted to rise through the ranks of Roman society, you had to be seen in the right places, like the bathhouse, interacting with the right people. It was a place where you could casually drop names, discuss politics, or subtly ask for favors, all while soaking in the same water as those who held the power. Imagine being a young up-and-comer, eager to make your mark, but you're stuck in the crowded pool with a bunch of sweaty old men discussing the latest political scandal. There's no escaping the tension. The stakes are high and every word counts. The bathhouse was a place where power dynamics were subtly reinforced. Wealthier Romans were often given preferential treatment, access to the best pools, the hottest saunas, and sometimes even private spaces. This made the bathhouse not only a space for literal cleansing, but also a social tool that reinforced class distinctions. Those with power could make connections with others of their class, all while maintaining an air of exclusivity. The common folk, on the other hand, had to make do with the crowded, overheated, less glamorous sections of the bathhouse. But even they knew that their time there could open up opportunities for business or influence. If you were an ambitious Roman, your bathhouse game had to be on point. It wasn't just about having the right contacts, it was about knowing how to interact in these sweaty, exposed environments. You had to be comfortable with small talk and be prepared to navigate conversations about the empire's military strategies, the latest gossip about the emperor, or even scandalous personal matters without turning red from the heat. And just like modern-day networking events, the bathhouse wasn't always a guaranteed success. You might find yourself in an awkward situation where the conversation falters, or worse, you overhear something that wasn't meant for your ears. But networking in the bathhouse wasn't all serious business. It was also about creating a reputation, making friends, and forming connections that could help you both professionally and socially. You might find yourself laughing with a new acquaintance about a gladiator's latest fight, only for the conversation to segue into a conversation about the Senate's latest decree. The bathhouse was a place where your social grace and ability to navigate uncomfortable situations were put to the test. Could you hold your own in a conversation with a military leader while sweat dripped into your eyes? Could you keep your composure when a wealthy merchant starts offering unsolicited advice on politics? These were the tests of your social savvy. In the end, the Roman bathhouse was the ultimate arena for power moves, both subtle and overt. Whether you were looking for business deals, political influence, or just a good chat, the the bathhouse was where it happened, but it wasn't without its awkwardness. Being in such close proximity to other bathers meant that every word, every gesture, every splash of water could make or break your reputation. Networking in the Roman bathhouse wasn't for the faint of heart. You had to embrace the discomfort, both physical and social, and master the art of making your connections in a setting where your most vulnerable self was on full display. So next time you step into a meeting or a social gathering, remember, you could be doing it while dripping with sweat, with your entire social status at stake, but at least you'll have a towel to hide behind. Sure, the bathhouses were a place of relaxation, but things could go south real quick. People slipping, falling, overheating, bathhouse accidents were common. And let's not even mention the other types of accidents that happened in the water. Who's to say that the man next to you didn't get a little too comfortable and accidentally let one rip in the warm water? Or maybe, just maybe, your legs got tangled with the strangers in the steam room. We can only imagine how uncomfortable that must have been, but in the end, it was all part of the fun. In a bathhouse as crowded and steamy as the ones in ancient Rome, accidents were inevitable. First off, let's talk about slipping. We've all been in a slippery situation. Maybe you've slipped on a wet floor at the gym or in your own shower. Now imagine that, but on stone floors covered in water and oil, in a room where people are walking around naked, all trying to navigate the steamy, humid air. Add a bit of sweat to the mix, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Bathhouses, with their grand pools and slippery surfaces, were prime locations for accidental slips and falls. It wasn't uncommon for bathers to lose their footing while trying to move between rooms, causing them to tumble into the pool, or worse, land with a splash in a pile of fellow bathers. While the caldarium and the frigidarium might sound relaxing, the extreme temperatures of both rooms made it easy for someone to overheat or get dizzy. The hot, humid air in the caldarium was perfect for relaxing muscles, but it also posed a risk, especially if you stayed in too long. The intense heat, combined with the crowded conditions, could lead to fainting spells. People who had spent too much time sweating in the heat could suddenly feel lightheaded and collapse, causing a mini panic or even a domino effect of people slipping and falling in the chaos. The bathhouse wasn't just a space for physical relaxation, it was a place where, if you weren't careful, you could find yourself in an accident that involved more than just the usual slip and fall. But then, of course, there were the awkward accidents, those moments that made bathhouse socializing even more interesting. In a space where personal space was already limited, you were bound to get a little too close to someone, especially in the heat of the moment. Imagine trying to relax in the tepidarium or frigidarium, only to have someone's foot touch yours unexpectedly. It's uncomfortable enough in a modern bath or hot tub, but add in the sweat, the oil, and the cramped quarters, and suddenly it feels like you're trapped in a game of whose foot is that. The question wasn't just whether you would get tangled in a stranger's limbs, it was how you'd handle it once you did. A quiet sorry probably didn't cut it in the social dynamics of the bathhouse. If you weren't careful, those moments could turn into awkward encounters that lingered in your memory long after the water had cooled. And let's not forget the possibility of other accidents that could happen in a room full of naked strangers. We've all had embarrassing moments in pools or hot tubs, and it's not hard to imagine that those shared experiences in ancient Roman baths might have involved their own brand of social faux pas. For example, someone getting a little too comfortable in the warm water and, well, Letting one rip might have been just another uncomfortable part of the bathhouse experience. Think about it. You're in a communal pool, trying to relax and enjoy the company around you, when suddenly, whoosh, a loud, unmistakable sound erupts from the water. There's no hiding it in the bathhouse, no pretending it was a splash. The shared space meant that any slip-ups, pun intended, were immediately evident to all. It was just another day at the bathhouse, where humor and discomfort often went hand in hand. Of course, no one really talked about these accidents, at least not openly. It wasn't the kind of thing to bring up over a glass of watered-down wine. But in the chaos of the Roman bath, these awkward moments were simply part of the package deal. After all, in a society where personal space was already a foreign concept, privacy was almost non-existent, and any semblance of modesty was completely stripped away. Accidents like these were just part of the fun. Despite these mishaps, the bathhouse was a place where the ups and downs of socializing happened. Yes, there were slips and falls, unintentional foot tangles, and occasional embarrassing noises, but that was all part of the messy, sweaty, social experience that the Romans embraced. For all the chaos that came with a communal bath, there was a certain charm to the idea that everyone, no matter who you were, could share a laugh or a grimace over the unspoken, often hilarious moments that unfolded in those steamy rooms. In the end, the bathhouse was a space where cleanliness and discomfort coexisted, where serious accidents and lighthearted moments collided, and where people connected in ways that went beyond the superficial. Sure, things got a little too steamy now and then, but that was just part of the experience. If you were lucky enough to make it out of the bathhouse without a bruised ego or a moment of accidental intimacy, you could consider your day a success. But if not, well, at least you were part of something uniquely Roman, and you probably had a funny story to tell afterward. So, as you settle into the comfort of your own bed tonight, with soft sheets and a warm, private bath waiting in your future, maybe take a moment to appreciate how far we've come since the days of Roman bathhouses. Sure, the Romans had their aqueducts, their grand pools, and their social dynamics, but they also had their fair share of awkward accidents, murky water, and naked, sweaty strangers. They may have perfected the art of communal bathing, but cleanliness, well, that was a bit of a rough concept for them. And while we've improved on the basics, like keeping our bathwater clean and not scraping our skin off with metal tools, there's still something oddly charming about the ancient Roman approach to relaxation. After all, in those chaotic, steamy rooms, with all the gossip, the mishaps, and the occasional awkward moment, the bathhouse wasn't just about getting clean. It was about connecting, socializing, and embracing the vulnerability that comes with being completely exposed, both physically and emotionally. So tonight, as you tuck into your clean bed with hot water and indoor plumbing, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors who survived murky bathwater, scrubbing with metal tools, and perhaps the occasional loud sound from an overenthusiastic bather. Because at the end of the day, the Romans may have been sweating it out in ways we can't quite imagine, but they were also part of something bigger, something communal, where the human experience was laid bare in more ways than one. Because history may be messy and uncomfortable at times, but it's also proof that people are resilient, adaptable, and a little ridiculous. And who knows, maybe the next time you step into a bath, you'll remember the Romans, their steamy, slippery rituals, and the way they embraced the chaos. So relax, take a deep breath, and enjoy your well-earned comfort After all, you've come a long way from ancient Roman bathwater. Okay, good night.